विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे ओम अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवतीरुत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी हरे कृष्ण. So reading from Canto 7, Chapter 8, entitled Lord Nrsimhadev slays the king of demons Hiranyakashipu. And we are on text 34 today. So text 34. And I'll read the text a couple of times. Tata sambha sabhayam upavishtamuttame nrupasane sambhuta tejasam vibhum alikshatadvairathamatyamarshanam prachandavaktram navabhaja kasyana ततः सभायामुपविष्टमुत्तमे नृपासने संभृततेजसं विभुम् अलक्षितद्वैरथमत्यमर्षणम् प्रचण्डवक्त्रं न बभाज कश्चन ततः सभायामुपविष्टमुत्तमे नृपासने संभृततेजसं विभुम् अलक्षितद्वैरथमत्यमर्षणम् प्रचण्डवक्त्रं न बभाज कश्चन. Devotees can chant.
तत्सभयम् उपविष्टमुत्तमे नृपासने संवृततेजसं विभुम् अलक्षितद्वैरथम् अत्यमर्शनम् प्रचण्डवक्त्रं न बभाज कश्चन.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to chant this verse? Okay. I'll read the word for word translation. Tataha, thereafter, Sabhayam, in the assembly house, Upavishtham, seated, Uttame, on the best, Nrupasane, throne upon which King Hiranyakashipu used to sit. You know the word asana. Asana means like Vyasasana. Asana means a seat. And Nrupa means king. So Nrupasana means throne, the king's seat. Sambrishta Tejasam, in full effulgence. Vibhum, the Supreme Lord. Alakshita Vairatham, whose challenger or enemy was not seen. Alaksha, that word means unseen. You remember that word in the prayers of Queen Kunti also it comes. Alaksha sarvabhutanam antar bhairavasthitam. So Krishna cannot be seen by those who are materially covered. That's the verse. Maya javanikachanam, that verse, that word. Alaksha also comes there. Same word. Ati, very much. Asmaranam. This is Amarshanam, fearsome due to his anger. Prachanda, terrible. Vaktram, face. Na, not. Babhaja, worshipped. Kaschana, anyone. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Manifesting a full effulgence and a fearsome countenance, Lord Nrsimha, being very angry and finding no contestant to face his power and opulence, then sat down in the assembly hall on the excellent throne of the king. Because of fear and obedience, no one could come forward to serve the Lord directly. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. When the Lord sat on the throne of Hiranyakashipu, there was no one to protest. No enemy came forward on behalf of Hiranyakashipu to fight with the Lord. This means that his supremacy was immediately accepted by all the demons. Another point is that although Hiranyakashipu treated the Lord as his bitterest enemy, he was the Lord's faithful servant in Vaikuntha, and had therefore the Lord had no hesitation in sitting on the throne that Hiranyakashipu had so laboriously created. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks in this connection that sometimes, with great care and attention, great saintly persons and rishis offer the Lord valuable seats dedicated with Vedic mantras and tantras, but still the Lord does not sit upon those thrones. Hiranyakashipu, however, had formerly been Jaya, the doorkeeper at the Vaikuntha gate. And although he had fallen because of the curse of the Brahmanas and had gotten the nature of a demon, and although he had never offered anything to the Lord as Hiranyakashipu, the Lord is so affectionate to his devotees and servants that he nonetheless took pleasure in sitting on the throne that Hiranyakashipu had created. In this regard, it is to be understood that a devotee is fortunate in any condition of his life. I'll read the translation again for context. So, manifesting a full effulgence and a fearsome countenance, Lord Narasimha, being very angry and finding no contestant to face his power and opulence, then sat down in the assembly hall on that excellent throne of the king. Because of fear and obedience, no one could come forward to serve the Lord directly. So this is a continuation of the beautiful section of the Srimad Bhagavatam where Lord Nrsimhadev appears from the pillar in the assembly hall of Hiranyakashipu, and he kills the demon Hiranyakashipu. We read in the previous verses how the demon fought with Lord Nrsimhadev, and Lord Nrsimhadev finally caught him, just like it's like Garuda, king of the birds, catches a serpent, or a cat catches a mouse. He just caught him and placed him on his lap at the doorway of the assembly hall. And all these points are very significant because these are all based on the benedictions offered by Brahma to Hiranyakashipu, that he would not be killed either inside or outside. So the Lord put him on his lap, which is neither on land or on the sky, right on the assembly hall, the gateway, the doorway of the assembly hall. So it's neither inside nor outside. And it was dusk. It was 7 p.m. or thereabouts, and it was dusk. It was neither day nor night. So he fulfilled that condition as well. And then Lord Nrsimhadev himself was neither a man nor animal, namrugam namanusham. So he had asked for a benediction that should be neither killed by a man or an animal. And Lord Nrsimhadev was neither. He was neither a creature created by Brahma, nor was he a man or an animal. And he cut him and tore him up with his nails. The nails are not a weapon in the traditional sense. And they're neither living nor non-living. So he'd also said I should be killed neither by something living nor non-living. So the nails are considered neither living nor non-living. So he tore the abdomen of Hiranyakashipu and garnered himself with the intestines of Hiranyakashipu. So in a materialistic sense, it seems very ghastly, but this is the Supreme Lord we're speaking about. So the whole scene was very transcendently beautiful. The Lord looked extremely beautiful with the garland of intestines around his neck. And he was extremely angry. And in this verse we see Prachanda Vaktram, a terrible face. Amarshanam, who was very fearsome. So the Lord was very, very fearsome. And because of his extreme anger, nobody was able to even come close to him. No one could come forward to serve the Lord directly. Nobody could protest. Whoever had to protest had protested, and we saw in the previous verses, the Lord just simply killed them all with the tips of his fingers, with his fingernails. He killed all the enemies who came forward to protest initially when Hiranyakashipu was killed. all the enemy soldiers, all the demon soldiers were all killed. And there was nobody left. There was nobody left in the assembly hall who would even come close to Lord Nrsingadev to be able to either say anything or protest or even agree with him. It was such a fearsome scene. Lord Nrsingadev was in fearsome anger. This is the Ugra Nrsimha Rupa, or the form of Lord Nrsingadev who is in extreme anger. So Lord Nrsingadev, I've said before, the three Purna Purushottama incarnations of the Lord. The Lord comes as Krishna himself. Krishna is the Bhagavan Swayam. So Krishna is not an incarnation, he's Bhagavan himself. He is the source of all incarnations. So Lord Krishna is Purna Purushottam Bhagavan. Similarly, Lord Ramachandra, whose appearance day was celebrated recently, just a week back, he's also Purna Purushottam Bhagavan. And then Lord Nrsimhadev is also considered Purna Purushottam Bhagavan. So you see many, many, many temples dedicated to Lord Shri Krishna, Lord Ramachandra, and Lord Nrsimhadev throughout India. There are many, many temples, especially in South India, that are dedicated to Lord Nrsimhadev. So Lord Nrsimhadev's worship is considered very, very auspicious because he's Purna Purushottam Bhagavan. But typically, the worship of Lord Nrsimhadev is done in his more peaceful forms. So after he was pacified by Prahlad Maharaj, he's worshipped as Prahlad Nrsimha with Prahlad Maharaj sitting on his lap. That form of Lord Nrsimhadev is very often worshipped. And then Lakshmi Narasimha, when Lord Nrsimhadev is sitting along with Lakshmi Devi, that form is worshipped. So Lord Lakshmi Narasimha is very commonly worshipped. Prahlad Nrsimha is very commonly worshipped. And then there's other forms of Lord Nrsimhadev. So Sthanu Nrsimhadev. Sthanu means seated. So the seated form of Lord Nrsimhadev, after he sits on his throne and is completely pacified, is worshipped. Yoga Nrsimha is worshipped in some places where Lord Nrsimhadev is in a yogic posture, is meditating, and that form is worshipped. So all these forms of Nrsimhadev are very, very commonly worshipped throughout wherever Vedic traditions are followed very, very properly. But rarely do you find Ugra Nrsimhadev being worshipped. Of course, the form of Ugra Nrsimhadev is in our Mayapur Chandrodaya temple to some extent, right? So just before he was ready to pounce. But typically the form of Lord Nrsimhadev, after he's pounced and killed Hiranyakashipu, that fearsome form, is generally not either created nor worshipped because it's just too aggressive and too fearsome for that level of worship to be followed. And actually, according to the specifics of how Shaligram Shila is also worshipped, there is a Ugra Nrsimha Shila. Just like you have different Shilas, right? You have Varaha Nrsimha Shila or Varaha Shila or Kurma Shila. Those of you who know the signs of Shaligram worship, Shaligram worship is very, very has to have a very specific way Shaligram Shilas are worshipped, and specifically Ugra Nrsimha Shila, the Shaligram Shila, which is representing the ferocious form of Lord Nrsimhadev, is not worshipped by anyone. It can only be worshipped by Nashtika Brahmacharis or sannyasis. So those who've never had any association with women in one sense, right? So Nashtika Brahmacharis or sannyasis, and even they generally are very careful when they worship Ugra Nrsimhadev. So this form of Lord Nrsimhadev that is presented in this verse and the past few verses is a very, very fierce form of the Lord. And it's also his opulence. His form of aggression and his beauty of his aggression is also a form of opulence, which is discussed here. And a very beautiful point that Srila Prabhupada makes in the purport from the commentary of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is about the reciprocation of Lord Nrsimhadev even in this form. Although Lord Nrsimhadev was in complete fearsome form, and he was looking around and he was completely in this form of Ugra, or there's no actual direct translation for the word Ugra. It's just extreme intensity of anger. his ultimate intensity of anger. He was in that form that nobody could even come, not only just come close, but even think of coming close. And you will read in the subsequent verses where even the devatas were looking at each other and saying, well, you go. Oh, no, you go. Nobody was ready to go. And finally, they said, Prahlad Maharaj, you should go. And we will read the wonderful prayers of Prahlad Maharaj. But essentially, his form was so fierce that there was no question of anybody even trying to go near Lord Nrsingadev. And in that form and in that mood, Lord Nrsingadev still reciprocated with his dear servant Jaya in the form of Hiranyakashipu. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points that out, that the throne, the royal throne of Hiranyakashipu, which the king had constructed with so much labor, laboriously created, because he had taken charge of the entire universe, right? So one can easily build a physical throne and claim that that is the throne of the king of the world, but that doesn't make a person the king of the world. You actually have to conquer the whole world to be the king of the world. You cannot just construct a throne in your own home and then sit on it and claim to be the king, right? One can claim to be anything, but to actually be the king, you have to actually be considered and recognized as the king of the world. So Hiranyakashipu was the undisputed king of the universe. There was nobody else within the material universe who was even ready to compete with him. So that was the position of Hiranyakashipu. So the throne that he had created not only was a physical chair, it was also representative of the fact that he was the undisputed ruler of the entire material creation. So it represented that fact. Just like the Vyasasana that we have in our temples represents the ability for the person speaking on that Vyasasana to be able to speak authentically via parampara, represent the principles of Krishna consciousness via parampara. It is not an opportunity for us to provide our own opinions or provide our own ideas of how things should be done. That is not the point of the Vyasasana. The Vyasasana is to be able to represent the words of Srila Vyasadeva coming through parampara that we've heard from our spiritual master, that can be presented accurately to the best of our ability in the service of the devotees. Similarly, the throne of Hiranyakashipu represented the authority of him to rule over the entire material manifestation, which he had created with so much labor. So the labor that's being discussed here is not the labor of actually constructing the physical chair. The labor is the labor which went into actually achieving the position of the emperor of the entire material creation. If you remember in the earlier chapters, you saw how laboriously Hiranyakashipu performed austerities for thousands of years, standing on one leg with his arms raised. That is the labor. He went through the severe austerity of achieving these great powers. He went through the labor of conquering all the material places in this universe, and then establishing himself as the ruler of the material manifestation. And that is the labor that has been discussed. So with that labor, he established himself as a ruler of the material manifestation. So when Lord Nrsingadev killed Hiranyakashipu, he accepted that labor as an offering. And this is the wonderful reciprocation of the Lord that very sweetly comes out in this quite aggressive section of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that you're not expecting any sweetness in this section, but even in this section, there is a lot of sweetness, where the Lord says that he can accept reciprocation in any condition. That's why in the last sentence of the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, in this regard, it is to be understood that a devotee is fortunate in any condition of his life. So the subtle point that comes out of this whole verse and this purport is the reciprocation of the Lord. Ye yatham mam prabadhyante tam sataiva bhajamyaham mama vartmana vartante manushyaha partha sarvasha. Krishna says that however you reciprocate with me, I will reciprocate with you accordingly. And Lord Nrsingadev was able to accept the offering of Hiranyakashipu, although involuntarily offered, but essentially by fighting with the Lord, Hiranyakashipu offered his throne to Lord Nrsingadev. saying that if you win, then my throne is yours. But if I win, the throne remains with me. So it's like an offering in that sense. Right? So when someone challenges, it's like when Duryodhan and Arjun were challenged in the fight, the deal is that whoever wins gets the kingdom. In the same scenario, when Hiranyakashipu decided to fight with Lord Nrsingadev, the the deal is that whoever wins that battle becomes the owner of that throne. So indirectly, Hiranyakashipu made that offering to Lord Nrsingadev, saying, "If we fight, and if I'm dead, then the offering of that throne is yours." So Lord Nrsingadev was able to accept that offering, was willingly accepting that offering of of reluctantly giving love to Lord Nrsingadev. And he remembered that this is just my dear servant, Jai, who's been my eternal servant. So I'm accepting his offering. And so this actually points to one very specific quality of the Lord. This very specific quality of the Lord, which is in Sanskrit, it's called kritagyata. In English, it's loosely translated as gratitude. So the Lord is very, very, very extremely grateful for any little service or any little reciprocation that we do. This word kritagya in Sanskrit uh, is broken into two words actually. Krita means something that has been done, and gya means to know. The same root for jnana, it comes from that same word gya. Gya is a root word for knowledge. So kritagya means to know or remember something that has been done. And that is what gratitude is. So we always remember what something has been done to us by somebody in a positive way, no matter when. And that is a mood of kritagyata. The opposite of kritagya is kritagna. Kritagna means one who disregards something that has been done for them, which loosely translates as ungrateful. So this quality of kritagyata is an essential quality for becoming Krishna conscious and remaining Krishna conscious. If we don't cultivate this quality of kritagyata or gratitude, it is very, very difficult to maintain our Krishna consciousness. Then it's very, very easy to become bitter with all the things that are happening in our life without this quality of kritagyata. And Lord Krishna, the Supreme Lord in all his forms, exhibits this form of kritagyata in abundance. Of course, Lord Chaitanya's pastimes in Chaitanya Charitamrita are full of examples of kritagyata, of how devotees engage with each other with extreme amount of gratitude, extreme amount of knowledge of what was done for them. The whole idea of service to the spiritual master and our devotion to our spiritual master stems from this fact of kritagyata or gratitude. Because our spiritual master takes us to Krishna, connects us with Krishna, connects us with the parampara. And that very act of connecting us with the parampara is sufficient for us to have eternal gratitude to our spiritual master. And how do we repay? How do we repay that debt? It can never be repaid in that sense. It can never be repaid. The Srimad Bhagavatam, it says that the word that's used is vinodapatram, one who tries to repay the debt that's incurred to the spiritual master is considered a vinodapatram. Vinoda means amusement or joke, and patram means object. So he becomes an object of ridicule, essentially, trying to repay the debt of the spiritual master. But the way we do it is by sincerely following the instructions of the spiritual master. So at least we accept the gift that we give. That's how we show our gratitude, by following the instructions. So I wanted to speak about just a couple of things, just in a couple of examples of how the Lord shows his gratitude in all respects. And one very striking example of this is from the Ramayana, when Sita has been kidnapped by Ravana, and she's being taken on the Pushpaka Viman, which is really a plane, loosely translated flower airplane. That's what it's called, but that's really what the plane was, the personal aircraft of Ravana, in which he was taking Sita. And this bird, vulture, Gridha means vulture, and he was a very old vulture. He was not in his prime of his youth. He was already, according to the Ramayana, already uh, several thousand years old. He was already pretty old. And he was just laying there, and he saw this airplane go up in the sky, and he recognized that there was Ravan, who, of course, was very fearsome. He was not some small time crook. He was well known as the most powerful demon. And he saw the cries of Mother Sita, and he recognized this is the wife of Lord Ram, the daughter-in-law of Dasharath, who's my friend. And he immediately leapt up and decided to engage Ravana to stop him from taking Sita. Now, Jatayu could have very easily thought, I'm already so old. There's really no way I can fight Ravana. This is not really something that I can actually do. So it might be better for me to just watch where Ravana is taking Sita so that I can inform whoever else going to come searching for her where exactly Ravana went. So let me silently follow them and then figure out where he's going so that I can go and inform Ram and others this is where Sita is taken. So that could be better service. But that was not what Jatayu thought. He immediately, even without hesitating for a second for his own life, jumped up, flew up, and then engaged Ravana in a very intense battle, which is described in great detail in the Ramayana. And Ravana eventually succeeded in cutting off the wings of Jatayu and injuring him to a point where he fell down back on the ground. And so when Ram and Lakshman came through that pathway searching for Mother Sita, they saw this fatally injured, very grievously injured, huge vulture. And Lord Ramchandra recognized him as Jatayu. Of course, there's more intricacies in that story, but the point of the story is what I'm coming to, where Jatayu told Ramchandra that this is where Mother Sita went, and Lord Ramchandra was so grateful to Jatayu. And Lord Ramchandra tells Jatayu that I cannot repay what you have done for me ever. And when Lord Ramchandra saw Jatayu leaving his body, Lord Ramchandra says that the pain that I'm feeling seeing you leave my body for my sake, for you fought for me and then you're leaving your body now. That pain is even more than the pain I felt when my father, Maharaj Dasharath, left his body. When I heard that Maharaj Dasharath left his body, it was intense pain. This pain is even more intense than that. And if you remember from the Ramayana, Lord Ramchandra was not able to do the last rites for his father. He was not present in Ayodhya. The last rites were done by Bharat Maharaj. Lord Ramchandra was already in the forest. But Lord Ramchandra did the last rites for Jatayu. So the intensity of gratitude that Lord Ramchandra had for a lowly bird. Vulture is not the most pretty bird. Not like a peacock that we have in our farm. Peacocks look very nice, even when guests and visitors come to our farm and they see a peacock in full, showing their feathers fully. It's very attractive. People who are visitors are always going to stop and take a picture, and it's just an amazing sight for them. Nobody does that when you see a vulture. You see, vultures are not the prettiest bird, so nobody wants to stop and take a picture or selfie with a vulture. So Lord Ramchandra had extreme gratitude even for a vulture that did some service for Lord Ramchandra. Similarly, Lord Krishna told the gopis that I cannot repay you for your love for me, even in a million lifetimes. So, this idea of gratitude is something that the Lord Himself instills in us by His own example. And Hiranyakashipu showed that same level of reciprocation and gratitude to Lord Shingadev showed that same level of gratitude to Hiranyakashipu by accepting something that was given to him, although unwillingly, but it was given to him, and he accepted that. And Lord Nrsingadev sat on the throne to show that he's accepted the offering of Hiranyakashipu. So this whole point of this whole section is, despite the anger, the extreme anger of Lord Nrsingadev, he still accepted the offering of Hiranyakashipu and sat on the throne. So those were some points from the specific verse and the purport. Of course, this whole section is very wonderful, where and it's going to get more sweeter with the prayers of the various demigods and then the prayers of Prahlad Maharaj, which is the cherry on the cake. So thank you. Thank you. If there are any questions or any comments or anybody would like to share something, please do. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Yes, Harichakra, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Thank you. Thank you for your class. And Dandava Pranam. All glories to you. All glories to the assembly devotees. My question is, during your deliberation, you kept saying that Hiranyakashipu was the controller. I mean, he became the king of the entire material manifestation. And it got me confused a little bit. So I want a little bit clarification from there. Because I know what I know is that it was our Lord Brahma who gave him the boon, or the boon that made him so powerful. So was he the controller of our universe or the entire material creation?
Yeah, so for all practical purposes, for all intents and purposes, Hiranyakashipu was the controller of the material universe. Of course, Brahma is the creator, and he ultimately is the chief engineer of the material creation of this universe. Hiranyakashipu became so powerful that in the Srimad Bhagavatam it is said he became the master of the demigods, except the three principal guna avatars, which is the Lord himself in the form of Vishnu, Lord Shiva, and Lord Brahma. So outside of these three, Hiranyakashipu became the master of all the demigods as well, including Indra and Chandra and everybody else. So including all the heavenly planets which were part of the material manifestation, Hiranyakashipu became the master of all these different entities as well. So for all intents and purposes, right? So without getting into the specific technicality of did he become the master of Brahma or not? No, he did not become the master of Brahma because he got the boon from Brahma. But for all practical purposes, everything that was happening in the material creation was happening under the authority of Hiranyakashipu, which is why I said he was the master of the material manifestation. But his reign was obviously very short lived. He was not the eternal master of the material manifestation. And when you look at the process of creation, Lord Brahma still is the master of the material creation. And Lord Shiva is the master of the destruction, and Lord Vishnu is in charge of maintenance. So this is what we hear from the Srimad Bhagavatam. But for the duration when Hiranyakashipu was ruling, for all intents and purposes, he became the master of the material manifestation. So I use that phrase more from that perspective as opposed to technically saying he was the master of the entire creation or so on and so forth. So that was the clarification I wanted to offer on that point. Does that answer your question, Harshakar Prabhu?
Oh, yeah. I understand.
It was more of a general point as opposed to a very specific technical point on the realm of Hiranyakashipu's reign. It was more around the fact that, for all intents and purposes, he was the master. Anything else anybody would like to add or share?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I'd like to thank you for a very nice class. I enjoyed hearing about different manifestations of Lord Nrsimhadev that are commonly worshipped, particularly the various Shalagram Shilas. I placed a photo of a Shringa Shila in the chat.
Yeah.
This is the Shila that is worshipped by Indradyumna Swami, which has an interesting story. There is in Madras, the name of Madras has been changed. I don't recall what it is now. I used to serve in Madras. And in Madras, there is a very old temple. Temple is supposed to be roughly 2,000 years old. It is a temple of Krishna Arjuna. And we used to sometimes go there for prasad when we did not have time for cooking. So there was one occasion on which we had been traveling in South India, delivering Srila Prabhupada's books to life members. For a period of 2 weeks, we were away from our temple, which was a house in a suburban neighborhood just outside of the main city of Madras. And upstairs in that house, it was a 2-story structure. There were verandas on the front and rear side of the house. And on one of them was kept a Tulsi Devi. And on one occasion, while the devotees were away, Srimati Tulsi Devi produced a bunch of manjaris which went to seed. And upon returning, I noticed that in some of the leaf litter on the veranda, there were little Tulsi Devis coming up. The rain had washed the seeds down and they germinated. So there were a bunch of new Tulsi Devis. And I thought, well, if the rain has washed them across the veranda, perhaps some of them have gone down the drain and they may be in the yard below. So I checked in the backyard, and sure enough, there were a whole bunch of Tulsi Devis coming up in the backyard. So I collected all of them and I repotted them with some soil and dried cow dung. So they were very tiny little Tulsi seedlings. And then we went traveling to a bunch of different South Indian cities. We were gone for a period of only 2 weeks. And when we returned, those Tulsi Devis were now about 2.5 feet tall or 2.5 feet in diameter, big, bushy plants. very, very densely covered in leaves. You could not see through the branches at any point. Incredibly lush, very unusual. The healthiest, most lush-looking Tulsi Devis I have ever seen, and they grew in a period of time that was miraculous. It is not. They appeared to be Tulsi Devis that were many years old, but they were only a few weeks old. And so we arrived back late in the day, and we were exhausted from traveling by train, and we didn't feel like cooking. And so one of the devotees went to this very ancient temple to collect some prasad. And while there, a Brahmin from that temple who had been observing us for some time, he had had some dream. The Shilas had instructed him two Shilas were instructed to be delivered to the ISKCON devotees. And so he gave this devotee, Bhavabhuti Prabhu, two Shilas, one of which had the imprint of a cow's hoof on its back, and the other one had a gaping mouth full of sharp teeth. So he brought them back to the temple, and at this point in time, there were no Shalagram Shilas being worshipped in ISKCON. Srila Prabhupada had given some instruction in Chaitanya Charitamrita that devotees would soon be permitted to begin the worship of Shalagram Shila. I think Srila Prabhupada had given one small Shila to Prajumna Prabhu, his Sanskrit specialist. So we had these two Shilas, and we didn't know what to do with them. So I thought, well, we will worship them with Tulsi leaves. And miraculously, we had now an incredible number of Tulsi leaves such as no one has ever seen. Unbelievable. So I went to the veranda where there were now dozens of Tulsi plants and collected a huge number of Tulsi leaves in a large mixing bowl. And I placed the Shilas on a deep, cushiony bed of Tulsi leaves and bathed them with some fresh water. And I covered them with more Tulsi leaves, thousands upon thousands of Tulsi leaves. We just had so many Tulsi leaves. And I think that Srimati Tulsi Devi had manifested just to receive these Shalagram Shilas. So we Bhavabhuti, who was the temple president at the time, he decided to send the Shilas to the New York temple. There was a life member who was departing India that night for New York. So we filled a small wooden box with Tulsi leaves to serve as like a packing material to cushion the Shilas. We completely surrounded and buried the Shilas in thousands of Tulsi leaves. So they were completely cushioned. and we sealed them in this wooden box, and that was delivered to the life member with instructions to deliver them directly to the New York temple on his arrival. Unfortunately, he didn't go directly there. And instead, he, not understanding the gravity of the matter, he placed the box in the mail. He went to the post office and mailed the box to the New York temple. So the box arrived in New York. The GBC Adikeshava received this box, opened it up, and found Shalagram Shilas. By this time, months had passed, many months. It was now, in fact, it was the next year. And by this time, I had returned from India, and I happened to be in New York. So the GBC came to me, and he understood that I must have had something to do with this because there was a message about them coming from Madras, and so I was severely chastised that these Shilas were sent through the mail. But subsequently, they were placed on the altar along with Radha Govinda and worshipped there by Chararatma Prabhu. He worshipped them for a number of years, and at some point, when the temple changed location, he adopted those two Shilas as his own and worshipped them in his home. But he was in a great deal of anxiety about the Nishringa Shila. He didn't feel qualified to conduct that worship. It was frightening. Simultaneously, Indrajumna Swami was admiring the Shalagram Shila, this particular Nishringa Shila, and he very much wanted to worship it. And so some kind of a deal was arranged, and that Nishringa Shila became under the care of Indrajumna Swami. And so it appears in the photo that I placed in the chat. As far as I know, it is still being worshipped by Indrajumna Swami. It was said that these Shilas were worshipped for several thousand years, even prior to their being worshipped in the, it was a Parthasarathi temple in Madras. So even prior to being worshipped there, they had been worshipped, and we don't really know the entire history, but very extraordinary. To be in their presence is an extraordinary experience, I can tell you. Hard to describe, but transcendentally wonderful. Anyway, that's a little bit of ISKCON history I thought you might find interesting. Thank you again for your class, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Dr. Prabhuji, for sharing this story. This is such a wonderful story, and thank you for the picture as well. You all got the darshan of Ugra Nrsimha because of your mercy. Thank you. There are no other questions, then we can end here. Thank you. Nrsimhadev Bhagwan ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.